Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude BeyondMystic, and welcome to this deep woo-woo episode. I just noticed my poster's wrong. Of course, this is our new series poster here, Life is But a Dream, with the amazing Catherine Edwards. You can find her work here on YouTube at Catherine Edwards and also at CatherineEdwardsAcademy.com and CatherineEdwards.live. Catherine, that's a mouthful. How are you? Welcome back to the show.
I'm good. I've had a very fascinating week. Been speaking to lots of individual people. Oh, I've got a bit of an echo. Lots of individual people and lots of really great discussions. So I've got lots whirling around in my head. So I'm looking forward to a good chat with everyone tonight.
Well, it's always a good conversation when you're here too, and we're a little bit discombobulated here. Before we started the show, folks, my dog was going ballistic as I had 2 deliveries just as we were attempting to start the show here today. So thank you so much for joining us here on this live interactive show. I'll change that top banner here in a second. Of course, it's not a pay-per-view. And welcome, everyone. So we might be taking some questions from the audience a little bit later on in the show, but we want to start the conversation here on this idea that we kind of have to collectively change our focus and have maybe a higher level conversation than the one we've been having. At a certain point, we have to realize that you can only go so far with a certain initiation, and then when that's done, or when it no longer yields any new information, you have to change your track and your questioning in order to get to the next level. And so this is perhaps the reason why I brought up a hint of this conversation here in our new poster, Life is But a Dream. And my question here to the audience is, are we where we think we are? And are we when we think we are? Catherine, with that said, where do you want to start the episode here today?
There's so much we've got to talk about today, and I'm really excited about it and seeing what everyone else thinks about it. I've had some really, really interesting discussions with myself this week. And as you were saying, there's places where they send people like that. But there's so much I want to discuss with you and the audience. So why don't we start with, okay, there's been a lot of talk over the last year and frustrations that things aren't going as fast as people would like them to go. And there's also in forums like this, there's a lot of discussions that we need a certain number of people to be awake before things progress. So that's one side. So it's almost like those of us who think we're awake are waiting for more people to join that vibration, that bandwidth, whatever you want to cause, for things to move forward. But at the same time, we're quite critical of people that say have got this and think that we need to have this to protect them. So this whole, I'd love to open it up with this discussion about, on both sides, there seem to be this, we think another person or another group of people have got to behave differently for us to achieve the reality that we want.
Well, I'm not sure I have the answer to that, but that's a great question. Right. Let's open it up for conversation. What do you guys think in the audience? Because, you know, we've been discussing, Catherine and I, since the offset or the beginning of our shows, that we needed to have compassion for each other, and that everybody else's soul contract and soul mission is not ours. Like that result of that soul contract is not ours. We are only responsible for ours. Yet we say that, but sometimes we get caught in this loop of, is it also the truther community that's part of it? Is it, of course, the mainstream media, the propaganda machine? We're still getting caught in these divides. And that whole tactic of divide and conquer has worked really, really well against us as humanity for a long time. And this, again, is why we're trying to have these conversations maybe at a higher level, so that we don't do that divide portion. Now, in and of itself, I think it will happen. I mean, organically, soul contract-wise, universe has plans. And so whatever we as humans think, things are probably not going to develop anywhere closely or remotely the way we think it will. So at some point, we just have to do ourselves. And I think this is the hard part for a lot of people in this community who are trying to help each other, their families, their friends wake up, only to realize that at this stage in the game, I think it's all about doing ourselves. Everything else will kind of fold out the way it's supposed to be. What are your thoughts on that, Catherine?
Yeah, I think there's so many different layers to this. And I'm also looking at the comments in the chat as well, as much as I can keep up with them. So let's take it on a couple of different levels and then I'll pull it all together. So as a mother, and we've mentioned this before, you know, as a parent, you're making decisions for your children before they're even born. So it's part and parcel of being a parent, whether you're a two-legged children, four-legged children, winged or scaled. You know, you do have to make decisions for those in your care up to a certain point when they're old enough to do that for themselves. And also as a parent, I was personally very grateful when I had my first child to get other people saying to me, hey, have you thought about this? Have you looked into these? And are you sure you want to do that? So we can't all think of every possible question to ask at every stage of times. You know, we're all at different levels of awareness. And so sometimes I think it's really important that people pose that questions to you. Have you thought about this, etc.? But also I think there's a lot of people that would call themselves part of the awakened community or the spiritual community who are very much, it's all just about us and not about anyone else. And I can see that point of view as well. But my but for that is if no one spoke up, if you didn't have the Judy Mikoviches, if you didn't have all the scientists speaking up, if you didn't have all the people that's most of the names I can't mention on here that we've all been referring to over the last of the year, then none of us would know anything. So I think there's this fine line. And I think people sort of at the moment there seems to be a lot about, we'll just view everyone with love. But for example, I'm having a lot of situations in some of the groups that I'm interacting with, more outside the YouTube community, more in daily life, where people don't even want to ask the questions. It's very easy if someone asks the questions and you're in that discussion to then ask it in a questioning way and not a telling way. But when people are not even at awareness when they know there's a question to be asked about it, then that's why I think it gets tricky for people, because we have seen a lot of progression this week. I think is it Denmark? Where is it that they've just brought in the lockdowns for the people that are not here? I've seen it all over the place today. And, you know, at what stage do we say, yeah, we need to keep the pressure up and speaking out, because otherwise it's taking choice away from everyone. It's a very difficult balance, and one that I don't see is going too well at the moment in most of the conversations that I'm looking at. So I really don't have the answers, but it's what you and I spoke about last time in terms of, do we as a community, and I'm looking at everyone on here, to say, you know, everyone on here, do we need to change the track? Because there's a lot of people here saying it's a lost cause until the TV goes off. Well, I wouldn't go with that, because I'm not going to wait for the mainstream media to say something, because that's like me waiting for someone to come along and shoot me. You know, I don't know. It's a very interesting discussion, and I'd love to have more open discussions with people and hope that by having those discussions, we come up with some different solutions that we haven't necessarily got so far.
Right. It is a fine line. So a couple of thoughts came up as you were saying that. To me, okay, so let's go back to our poster, Life is But a Dream. And I think it was in your show last week or maybe the week before. We said, hey, if people don't wake up from this dream is turning into a nightmare for a lot of us. And you just mentioned Denmark as an example of the nightmare now that is imposed on the other people who are the other half of this equation. Cliff, I put out a video yesterday or the day before, I forget which one it was called now, but he was talking about loyalties, how we as humans right now are going to be tested in our loyalties. And when you said, oh, things don't look too great, I agree on the surface, there's a lot of weird, what you would call negative news. But at the same time, that negative news is also right now fortifying, on one side of the equation, the loyalties to what he calls the refuseniks. And it's also starting to disintegrate the base of those people who perhaps weren't awake and took the products as advertised. And so we're seeing a shift happen now. And I think you just mentioned CNN. You don't want to watch CNN. Well, of course, they're firing people right now and getting rid of their online media personalities because nobody watches them anymore. So they're becoming, as Clefai had said, irrelevant. So we've had this media casualty, and it's a compounding effect. Now, how quickly does that translate to, okay, we're as humans, we're done with this whole situation around the planet and we're moving into sci-fi world? I don't know how many more months, hopefully not how many more years, but I actually see optimism in all that negative news because of that test that universe is providing us to test our loyalties, our understandings, our ability to stand up for ourselves. I think this is where, again, this is kind of what Janine and I were alluding to in the decode for the Wizard of Oz show. Let me see if I can bring that poster back up for the audience here. And the reason we said that was that in the Wizard of Oz, Dorothy is the child here, and she's viewing this whole story, which is essentially a metaphor for the matrix of control, the financial system, and all of that. You guys can go watch the episode. But at the end of it, from her perspective as a child, she eventually finds the man behind the curtain and then realizes, oh, I had this power all along. The man doesn't have any power. And so that's where the movie stops. And what Janine and I were suggesting to the audience is perhaps that's not where the movie should stop. It stops there for the child and the perspective and the field of view of the child. But as humanity is moving into the age of Aquarius, the bearer of knowledge, we have to look at it from a much bigger perspective and perhaps ask that question. Like you were saying earlier, there's a question to be asked. Who gave the man behind the curtain all that technology to control the humans through this Emerald City and the green glasses and all these things? There is perhaps another player or entity or force behind that. And until we look all the way through there, we are susceptible to being duped once again with a new system where we're going to be shown, hey, this is the new system. It's good for you guys. It's better than the old one. But it could eventually be, here, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So this is why, again, we're trying to have these conversations and ask these difficult questions for each other. But I have to say, I'm cautiously optimistic, even though in the last week there's a lot of weird negative news coming out. What do you have to say on the Wizard of Oz decode and how that ties into this overall conversation of where we are, who we are, and perhaps when we are in this whole spiritual battle?
It's interesting because even as a child and especially as an adult, I absolutely hated that film. I hated it. I thought everything about it was terrible. The message overacted. So it's quite interesting for me to sort of look at that. But I think in terms of the message, I think you're exactly right. And I think this is the issue. We all talk about keep questioning. We all talk about the keep questioning. And it's a bit like V for Vendetta. You know, who is really putting those boundaries on us? And so I take that back to what I sort of started with and sort of saying, well, if we're all waiting for the mainstream media to start telling the truth and saying it's hopeless for them, or if we're all waiting for more people to wake up before things change, to me, I don't see any difference to what we're criticizing other people to behave of. Now, I'm not suggesting that people on this chat are sort of saying that. And I think your analogy and what you've been discussing about with Janine on that is really, really important. I must go and watch that episode. But I heard another really good interview. Now, David Martin was on the Red Pill Expo event. I think it was over the weekend. And his interview's on Rumble. I shared it on my Telegram. I can send it to you later. And he said some fascinating things that I think, he said the video is brilliant and it's he's very, very passionate in it. But one of the things that really hit home to me about that is that do we energize the forces of darkness when we anonymize them? So if we're just talking about organizations like MSM, if we're talking about a lot of the big family names that we're not allowed to mention on here, if we're constantly talking about they, I think we've got to get it right down to personal levels and stop generalizing about things, because all the while you keep things too general, too anonymous, you're not shining the light on where it really needs to be shone on. And we've said right from the start that you can't get rid of the darkness until you truly shine the light on it. And I don't think that beam of light is focused enough. So just like you were saying about who was giving the little man behind the curtain the power, I would like to say, let's stop as a community, just stop talking about white hats and black hats and things like this. And let's really all do our next level of research and start talking about specific people and specific names and see perhaps if that makes a difference. Because I do agree with David Martin. I think when you give people that anonymity and you don't get specific enough, you almost strengthen their power, because you're having conversations and putting energy into it without really shining the light on a specific bit of darkness. Does that make sense?
So I'm not sure what the translation is in English, but it goes something like this: the biggest trick the devil ever produced was to convince you that he doesn't exist, or words to that effect, right? Yeah. And so that's exactly that here. We're talking about, okay, so about a month ago or 2 months ago, you and I were discussing this idea of these low-level cons, the left-right paradigm, all of this stuff, the blacks against whites, the gays versus the non-gays, all that stuff, right? So, and then we started talking about this higher level of duality, only to realize that we're again falling in that same trap of, wait, there's something above and behind that. And I think this is where Ronnie says, so true, GC. I think this is where a lot of us are being challenged right now, where we kind of have to take a break and we're all kind of like long in the tooth. We're suffering from this fatigue of having to recreate the reality that we find ourselves in, and reset maybe those neuro-linguistic maps or patterns in our minds as to what we actually think is reality. And so I've seen this over the year as I've tried to bring this conversation along and push the edge of that envelope every time I come on air. I've seen some people get frustrated with me saying, oh, well, JC, it was this last week. I'm like, I know, but that was my understanding last week. And now we have to go further, and we have to perhaps revisit what we thought was correct last week. And at that time, it was appropriate to think that was correct last week. But now we have new evidence to look at, and perhaps now it's time to question it. And so for people who've been in this process review, if you want to call it that, from the IT world I was in, anyways, from this process review of looking at what's real and what's not, I think for people who are just now waking up, that's very difficult, because they're just grasping on now to the new reality they think they've understood for themselves finally, with their own, without the glasses or the green colored glasses, as what it's make the hologram of the Emerald City here in the Wizard of Oz. But at the same time, we're crashing that every day with these conversations. So, man, I'm having trouble even saying this at this point. I'm trying to figure out a way, even for myself, because you started the show by saying, where's that fine line? Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm having trouble as I don't know. I don't even know what I am at this point. I'm a person who does woo-woo on YouTube, but it's more than that. I'm trying to obtain mastery, and through that I have to challenge everything I think I know, and I'm trying to bring the audience along on my path, and so hopefully together we can make sense of it all. But even for myself, I have to find that fine line between crashing my frequency field because of this huge cognitive dissonance that I'm going through personally. So can you imagine the audience as well? Like, we're all going through this thing. Where is that fine line between pushing that every day to maybe push and finalize this war once and for all, versus maybe taking a break, going to hug the trees, loving everybody, and trying to find normalcy in this absolutely crazy world? I don't know, but my gut feeling is that we're kind of behind the 8 ball. So I have a personal drive that keeps pushing me, even though it's very uncomfortable sometimes. That's where I'm at. And I'm trying to have that same kind of compassion for everybody who's watching the show, because I'm thinking that people who keep watching this on a daily basis, coming to Catherine Edwards and myself, they also want to push that understanding of what reality is. Whether they know it or not, there's something in them trying to push. And maybe it's that sense of urgency. Maybe it's that sense that we are moving through these energies that are conducive to us, maybe finally becoming adults here, graduating from the Dorothy point of view of what the Wizard of Oz is to perhaps what the next level is. I don't know, but holding that balance, I have to admit, for myself, it's been a constant struggle, even this year, and especially in the last couple of weeks, to be quite honest.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very lucky because, as I always say, because I do believe I've created my own love, because I've got my animal sanctuary and things, I spend a huge amount of time from sort of 5 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night out in nature. And that is so, so grounding. And I must say, I'm loving this journey. I really am loving it. I'm loving the opportunity to have these amazing conversations with them, with people. But there's a reason we've spoken quite a bit with each other and with other guests that we've had on our shows about the flight, fight or freeze response. And there's a reason that when you're in a state of real danger, perceived or real, that you either go into the flight, you fight, or you freeze. And when that happens, physiologically, your body stops selling blood to other areas of your body. So it doesn't send blood to your digestive system, because it's getting all your body's energy resources are being sent to where it needs to do one of those things to get to yourself to a survival situation. And I think that's almost sort of where a lot of us are now. I mean, I don't feel in a fear state. I'm sure there's some things that probably trigger me into that, but not a lot, to be quite honest. I'm very much in a curious stage. Because I do believe that it's all going to be fine. And I do believe we're exactly where we're meant to be. But equally, I also do believe we will put him in these human bodies with free will for a reason and to use it. And one of the beauties of any form of teacher or anything is the skill of that is to almost like, say you've gone through a years long awakening process. Well, I would hope that everyone who's on this journey with us will have come up with things that were a bit of a red herring. So we don't need to send people down that pathway, and other things that are going to speed up that process. So I think one of the beauties that we've all been on this for a long while, and some people have been on it for 50 years and some people for 1 year and some people for 1 month. But we've all learnt a lot during the day, the way, and about what is good use of our time and what resonates and what doesn't. And it's great to pass that on to other people, because each time you pass that on, you speed up the process. And I think, that's why I feel really comfortable having discussions on platforms like this, because there's no one on here that hasn't chosen to be here. So they're voluntarily participating. And if they don't like what we're talking about, they can just leave. What I'm finding interesting is in people's day-to-day lives, I'm not seeing a lot of new people want to join in with any of these questions. So, for example, I've seen loads of comments in the chat. Well, people saying, have you seen they're offering boosters here? Well, they've been doing that for a long while in the UK. And most people of my age and older have already had those. And most of them aren't questioning it.
Uh-huh.
And things. So that's why I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued to say, well, what next? Because if you're a sports coach and your football team keeps losing, you would hope as a coach, you'd change tactics. You would hope you wouldn't just keep sending them out on the pitch to do the same mistakes over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then there's that question of, you and I had this conversation last week. We said, well, what is this thing that's happening around the planet? Is it in fact somehow, if you can describe it this way, a self-selecting euthanasia program? Yeah. And looking at the evidence, we both kind of says, well, it's sure as hell pointing that way. And now a week has gone by, and all of these news articles are coming out of these people just dropping on mainstream news through, football, soccer, whatever. Like it's absolutely incredible. So it keeps adding up, and now we're seeing all the media advertising of normalizing maybe heart attacks in children and all of these things. And so they know it's coming up. And it's funny because on one hand, I had a friend of mine last week, and I don't know if I said it in the show with you, or if it was the week after, who just kind of finally just succumbed to it. So she was a refusenick, and then she just finally said, okay, I give up, right? And as much as if that hurt me, and I was kind of scanning my horizon of who's in what camp, like the test that we're undergoing now, the loyalty test. I saw that person fall to the other side, but in general, I'm seeing more people from the other side wake up, whether that's because of the financial system breaking down and they're like, hey, wait, what's going on here? This inflation is not transitory. These guys are lying, right? Or whether it's because they're looking at sports and saying, oh my God, why are these people dying all of a sudden? What's going on here? Something's not right. So I'm seeing more people going from that camp into ours versus ours going into that one. So again, it's exciting, but
well, you said something really important there, Jean-Claude. Sorry to butt in, but this is exactly what I was talking to my ponies about an hour ago. They have really good conversations with me. They just nod and eat. But what you said there, is it almost controlled? I don't know whether you said euthanasia or what. So I was thinking, Cher, I've had conversations with other people about no fear kill. So in the old days, a lot of people, native tribes who were out hunting, had a lot of pride in the way that they would only take what was needed, and they would sneak up on their prey. They would be experts with their bow and arrows or guns, and they would take them without the prey animal even knowing the trouble was coming. And I did actually think that, I thought in the current scenario, because a lot of the people that are having problems are not expecting them at all. They're not expecting them. So for them, is it quite a kind way for them to go on that journey? You know, is it mean to actually wake them up out of their slumber? Because if that's their soul destiny, as everyone keeps saying, and their soul journey to do that, should we just let them go in blissful ignorance? It's just a thought.
It's a great question, Catherine. I've been debating that all year too, especially when I had family that, you know, I recognized that they took a different approach than me on this. So I was like, okay, do I stop even showing them now what's coming out in the news? And to some extent, they also somehow kind of, how do I say that, automatically or innately decided no longer to watch the news. It's kind of like they don't want to know. They don't want to hear it now. They know it, but they don't want to. So they're making maybe that unconscious decision of living blissfully until they get tapped in the head, as you said there, in the hunting aspect of things. It could be. I wanted to backtrack to something here, and I'm trying to figure out where it fits in, because a lot of people like you and myself had huge reactions to watching The Wizard of Oz as a child. For me, it was very scary, but there was an pinning dread to it, and I can never find why until just very recently. That's weird. I saw the financial decode maybe 10 years ago. I'm like, oh, okay, that's what that movie was about, and I understood it. But when I re-looked at it recently, I realized that these ruby slippers are also the key here, because in the book, she had silver slippers. And of course, that was alluding to silver meeting the foundation, the yellow brick road. That was really the core of the financial system, as opposed to the illusion of the paper dollar and the wealth of Emerald City. But these rubies, or these Red Shoe Club, if we want to call it that, from Hollywood, really brought another perspective to it. And so now, again, this is why, as humans, we're challenged to have these bigger conversations and to name those perpetrators. I think this is pressing up against the field now. I think we're very close to it. I mean, we've seen cracks in that facade over the last number of years. It started with, you know, for the people who are interested in pizza, for example, it started a couple of years ago. But I think now we're at this point where, when this goes, and I believe it will, it's going to be so massive that this might get that other cadre of people who are still in that test for human loyalty to really make that leap to becoming a free human, standing alone human, knowing who they are, where they're going, and having the ability to do so, as opposed to accepting to live under this Emerald City illusion that we've all been brought to submit to. And today I'm recording a new investigation show with Janine, and it's all about Walt Disney. And so it kind of follows up on this Wizard of Oz thing, and it's going to bring you guys towards, like, even now, I worked like 4 hours this morning prepping the slide deck for this one. My mind is still kind of like, and I haven't had Janine pull the cards on it yet, but where I think this is going is exactly that conversation we have to understand as humans. What's really behind this illusion? And then we can decide whether or not we want to continue living on this illusion and maybe break free from it. And then if we do break free from it, how do we as humans come together again and decide what is it we actually want? Because in Walt Disney, the whole idea of, should I say this now? Okay, the whole idea of using children and propaganda was to bring us to fortify that illusion of which we are in now. And so if you look at the baby boomers after World War II, how they were brain programmed and mind controlled through television, through all of these different tactics that perhaps were perfected or started in World War II, we see the result of that now. But that system is crumbling. And so we're getting that point now where the controllers want to give us a new system, and we have to figure out if that's the system we want, how to break it, and then what we actually want. Because everything we think we want them because we were programmed to want them.
Yeah.
Maybe 99% of it. For people who are highly, highly awake and mastered of self, they now are in control of their vehicles, but there's still maybe remnant programs of things that they think they want or that they desire, but it's absolutely not coming from their soul direction. It's coming from all of these past programs that we were so invaded with to begin with. So again, that's going to be a deep deep conversation moving forward. What are your thoughts on that?
It's so important. I mean, one man's medicine is another man's poison. One man's heaven is another man's nightmare. So I've always been in a strange position. When I was employable, and I decided to step away from that a long while ago. But, you know, I was in the time when in the big industries, they were all hot on change management, and I love change. And we were all taught that change is so difficult for everyone to cope with, and it's going to be really difficult and really hard. Therefore, we have to go through this. And I was like, this is fantastic. I love change. How interesting. Let's see what else we can do. Let's see what else we can do. So I do think we have to agree is not everyone wants what we want. So a lot of people that are watching this have got really quite key, you know, quite clear ideas about what they want their future to look like. So I'm literally one of these people, I think it was Einstein that says, you know, you can think that everything's a miracle or nothing's a miracle. And I'm one of these people that genuinely looks at everything. I mean, I went out for a 2-hour dog walk with my daughter today, and every single day I do that, I'm just like, this is so beautiful here. Oh my God, the Canadian geese have come back to winter in the UK. How does a goose fly all that way? If a goose can do that, what else is our body capable of? So that just happens to be the mindset that I've been born into in this incarnation. But I've got other friends that love nothing more than to sit there. Their ideal day is to sit on the sofa and read a book. And there's nothing wrong for it, because perhaps they've had really busy lives other times round, and perhaps this time they want to take it a bit easier. But I think also I have reached the stage where I'm 100% comfortable sharing my truth, and then people can choose whether to listen to it or not, because I believe everyone here has been put here for a purpose. And if we think we're seeing certain things, then we have a duty of care to report it, because there's no point telling someone afterwards, well, I knew that would kill your child, or I knew that would kill your animal. And every day I work with clients and their animals, and at the time they can be resistant, because it can seem a little bit overwhelming of all these things that they've got to do. I mean, I've just seen quite a few comments from my clients in the chat today saying they've been taking this product Clean Slate that I've been recommending. Now, this is amazing for detoxing the body, but also decalcifying the pineal gland. It's really fantastic. And what I see is when people take that little steps, other things snowball really, really quickly. And I think I'm really of the clear understanding now that I've got my vision of the future, but that is completely different to say what my two sisters would like to see their future look like. And that's okay. But equally, as a parent, I was at the stage where it was the MMR jabs that were just coming to light when I had my first child. And I was very grateful that other parents had been through the trauma of their children being damaged for sharing their information, which has enabled me to make different choices to my children before I made a decision that could have been disastrous. So I think if we keep sharing what is our truth, but we keep an open enough mind, that tomorrow we might discover something that completely changes our version of the truth.
And I think it's happening, well, tomorrow. It's happening every minute. I mean, really, when you see the rapidity of, or the speed at which the news cycle is running right now. I mean, Janine and I are doing 2 shows a week now, and we could do 7. I mean, and every time we start a show, we're like, oh my God, where do we start? It's been so long since we last talked. And it's like, no, it's just been 2 days. But it's absolutely crazy. I want to bring this up to the attention of the audience. The Blacklist. I don't know if you guys have watched this series at all, but there was a lot of disclosure in this series, and they were the first, well, not the first, but maybe really the first to really dive into the cabal and the bad guys, and how they usurp all of our systems where we think they're good systems, but really they're control mechanisms. And so he's ostensibly a criminal here, but he's helping the FBI. There's a specific task force, and they're basically hunting down these people on this blacklist, and they're changing the world, at least. But in season 9 here, the first episode, the main character, Ray Reddington, he's been called to come back to the fold and to work with the team. And he says, oh, I've had to learn to let go of so many things in the last 2 years. And I'm afraid if I look at this now, like, it'll bring me all back. And as he was saying that, of course, he's describing a specific traumatic event at the end of season 8. And now he's kind of like lost. But when I looked at it, it's like, oh, he's also talking about these last 2 years here. Because for me, I've also had to learn in the last 2 years to let go of so many things, people including, belief structures, things I used to take for granted, going to the movies, to the restaurant, like things like that, right? And so we're all being called to let go of things. And I think at first we resist that, and it's hard because these are the things that we know, and these are the things that create and solidify and make our reality, I guess, worthwhile. But as you start losing these things, you're like, well, what am I going to be left with? And then you go through that process and you realize, hey, wait a second. All of those things I've let go, and some of them difficult, and people, relationships and all that, only made room for new things to come into my life.
Yeah.
For the Catherine Edwards to come into my life, for the Janine to come into my life. You see what I mean? And then suddenly you realize, wait a second, I'm rebuilding now. And it's kind of an opportunity. At first I saw this as, oh my God, this is horrible. I'm losing my friends. I'm losing families over this. I'm losing the ability to do this and this and that. I am also taking joy in the new things that I'm finding, and also maybe putting more love and attention where I should have put more love and attention to the things that perhaps I still have, but that I was taking for granted before. So my mind has gone through this weird shift also in the last 2 years. And I think this is where, again, when you ask, well, where's that balance? I mean, it all comes down to the individual. I know I have to do what I have to do.
Yeah.
So I'm going to continue now. Like, I know, like, I have this deep knowing. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be. And I'm not ashamed of that. I feel so much in harmony, like never before in my life, that makes me feel good. Where I see the difference, though, is that I've scaled back trying to convince people who didn't come here, like on this channel, voluntarily. Yeah. Here, you and I can have a conversation with the audience. They came here to have this conversation with us and participate. At the restaurant, at my family parties, and they didn't really go into those family parties thinking, oh my God, JC's going to, he's going to completely destroy my worldview again. I hate this, right? So I think on that side of things, I've had to learn to let that go, continue to be who I am, living in my truth and my honesty with what I want, what I believe, and all that. Because again, we're being tested here in the universe, as Cliff is saying, into our loyalties. And so that's where I'm at. I hope for the audience, guys listening, that you can see maybe the positivity in all of this too, and see in your life how perhaps things that you've had to let go made room for other things too, and maybe made you be more appreciative of the things that you might have taken for granted before. How's that process been for you in the last year or two, Catherine? Letting go, and then also seeing how that was perhaps an opportunity.
I mean, I've had to let go of so much like you, but probably about 10 years ago, when I got very into a lot of the Joe Dispenza, Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay type of things. And I noticed a huge step increase in where my life was going, both physically, emotionally, spiritually. And what I found is that I was very well aware of the concept of that you have to make way, you have to clear out other things, whether it's an old sofa. If you want a new sofa, you've got to get rid of the other one first, otherwise you're not creating the space. But it doesn't mean it's not hard. And it is something that personally on a friendship level, I've struggled with more. But what I've realized now, a lot of people that know me know that I'm very blunt. I think particularly for a British person, because the British tend to beat around the bush a bit more and just be sort of trying polite and trying to put something in a nice way. And from all the work, all the animal communication work I've done, I found that that doesn't always serve people the best. So I try and be respectfully speak my truth without any expectation that they agree with me. And so what I found is that when I stop worrying about how I want someone else to perceive it, it's much more authentic. So again, I'm just concentrating on what I want to say, not being rude to people, not sort of upsetting their things, but not being afraid to be authentic. And then that gives people the choice, because not everyone's going to like us, and they certainly not everyone does like me at all. But the people I've attracted into my life have been the best ever. And I feel as a person, I'm growing so much more because of it. And I like the way, I really genuinely now like the way that I'm growing, because I'm surrounded myself with the people that I'm really resonating with, and they're challenging me. They're opening up new perspectives. Like conversations like this are just so wonderful. So I 100% do. I do find it sometimes very difficult to let go of old friends or family members. But once I've done it, funny enough, some of them have then come back in a different attitude. And that has been really wonderful to see. So I think...
And perhaps, might I interject here too? Yeah. Those people that come back into your life, anyways, in my experience, we are now at a much higher level of friendship than we were 10 years ago. Because now we have a better understanding, not just for our relationship, but for ourselves as part of that relationship, and a better appreciation for the other person's point of view than ever before. Whereas before, maybe these were friendships that, date from high school, and I had an understanding of a friendship that started in high school, but I never understood how I grew and that person grew over the last 20, 30 years, and how they were completely different. Whereas now, if they're coming back after a separation, that is kind of cleared up, and we have stronger bonds, I believe, moving forward. Have you seen that also as an experience?
Absolutely, completely. It's just so wonderful to see. And I think what I love is it's not just the people that respond like that. It's also the animals. Anyone who's got animals know that they pick up your real essence, not what you're trying to project out to the world. So they're absolutely fantastic at mirroring back to you where you're really at, not what you think you are, where you're pretending to yourself or others you're at. And I think the other thing that it's allowed me to do by sort of opening up to these sort of conversations is I really have become a lot less defensive of my opinions. And I think that's just been really, really important stage of sort of the evolution, because I genuinely want to discover new things and new ways of doing things, and not be attached to any past beliefs that I might have had. And I think now that I've reached, there's a lot of advantages of getting older, folks. You learn a lot for the mistakes you make in life. But I think now I can, I can laugh at myself a lot more. I can see how I was behaving before and how that might have attracted certain behavior back towards me. But now I'm very much, not everyone is meant to resonate at the same time. You're not meant to be at a frequency to everyone. There's different comments going through here. We're all at different levels of understanding and awareness. So not everything is meant to resonate with you or will do. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If there's some bits and you can take something from it, that's really good enough. And that's going to have been worth your your experience. So yeah, I'm finding it, I would say the last couple of months, the letting go has become a lot easier. And once I let go of that last bit of resistance, I've seen people come back in a very different relationship, and not all of them, but some. And that's just been a really good reflection to me that, yeah, you know, it's never them. It's always a combination of the energies.
Right. You just said something there that I think is probably, we've had a deep conversation here today, and I'm going to have to go rewatch it and listen to myself, because I was like, man, what was I saying? This was a hard one for me to explain, because as you know, I think in French, and especially when I'm emotional, I go deeper in my French roots. So explaining it in English in a live show, doing the translation, watching the screen, all that becomes taxing on me. So I hope everything I said makes sense. But you just said something that really struck me. You said you came to the point where you're less defensive about your opinions. And you struck me because, oh my God, so have I. And I've just realized this really recently. Whereas, let's say, for example, in 2008, when the financial system took an ugly turn, let's put it that way, I was telling everybody, hey, dude, it's a Ponzi scheme. Like, guys, get out of this. It's crazy. It's a Ponzi scheme. And people would look at me like, no, you're crazy. They'll just, you know, everything's okay. The sky's not falling, blah, 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 blah. And at that time, I took it personally, because that idea I thought was me. My understanding of the world around me, I equated that to who I was. Whereas today, because of how quickly my reality is changing every day, every minute of every day, as we're presented, and I'm gathering all of this new information, I'm realizing that my opinions are not me. My opinions are transitory, because so too is the nature of our reality. So how can I be offended with people who don't have, who oppose my opinions? I don't anymore. It's a transitory thing, and they're at their level of their understanding with their opinions. They could be ahead of me, they could be behind me, they could be exactly on the same page with me, and that's okay. That's their trajectory. And so now it's much easier, like you just said, because of that. And whether I realize it or verbalize it, like I'm verbalizing it now for the first time, it enables me to be much truer to my opinions also, without being afraid of who thinks or what, or the ridicule, or the what's the word? Not deception, but when you rejection of rejection, right? I don't fear that anymore. I was like, well, that's my opinion today. It might change tomorrow, so you can reject it or not. I really don't care. So it makes for these conversations now, they're probably a lot easier than they could have been on me maybe 10 years ago. How's that affected yours?
Yeah, it's so much easier. Oh, we've got Cliff here in the house. It's so much easier. And what I've done is I've really enjoyed over the last year, I've had the opportunity to listen to such a diverse range of people. And what I can see is I identify with little bits of this person, little bits of that. And then a week later, I'll have moved on to a different level and I'll have a different opinion. And I just think it's fantastic. And I think I heard you and Janine talking about one of your conversations. It's so important that we try and view the best in most people. And by that, I'm sort of, okay, what do I mean by that? I'm having a bit of giggle. I started off the show tonight by saying about we have to name names now. We've got to get more general, in my opinion. This is the stage I'm at. Might not be at the stage other people's at, but I feel very confident now getting very specific with my level of understandings if I think I can call someone out. Because, at the end of the day, I've seen the conversations and what my doctor's sending out. And I think in their position, it's completely inexcusable. And I'm very happy to call them out as one example. But I think it's really important we keep that open mind, we keep listening, we keep educating ourselves, and we don't just get into this repetitive mode where we're forwarding everything on Twitter or Telegram or whatever, and just Chinese whispers that are going a bit off track. I think even if it's our favorite person that we're listening to, we still think, yeah, do I want to spread this on? Do I want to play it forward? Do I really agree with it? Is this the vibration I want to be sharing? because we want to drop those false idols. We want to keep an open mind. We want to keep tuning in with our bodies. And that's another area that I've had another step up over the last year, is really stop having to intellectually explain everything and just feel the confidence that if it really feels wrong with me, even if my science friends are going to laugh at me because I can't give them the papers or I can't prove it, if I'm really feeling it, then I'm going to be confident to say it. And just, that's what I'm feeling. You don't have to feel the same. Because up until very recently, sort of coming from a scientific background, it was very frowned upon if you couldn't prove everything. Well, everything that you can prove a year later might be disproved anyway. So, I think keep pushing it forward, keep exploring, keep asking the questions, and keep learning.
Absolutely. Our friend Lisa says, I love the Flavor Woo video by Uncle Cliff. And John says, yes, Cliff, more videos. So guys, there's 3 last videos here since the 11th, I think. Flavor Woo, Yielding Woo, and what's the other one? Consequences? Or Complication Woo is the 3rd one here. Yeah, go check that out. And there you'll get a deeper understanding of what Catherine and I were kind of alluding to. Hopefully we were paying homage to what Cliff was saying here about how universe is testing us right now in our loyalties. And we are all going through this test, whether we know it or not. So that's a fabulous entry into that video. So go check them out on BitChute. That's bitchute.com/Cliff_.
Please come and join us next time in this chat, Cliff. I can only imagine how brilliant it would be if you want to come and join one of them.
Life is but a woo with Cliff High. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. I could change the poster for that. Yeah, life is but a woo. Or yeah, okay.
Cliff.
Cliff, you're always invited. Of course, you're always invited. So that would be really cool. Hey, Catherine, before we go, we have 5 minutes left on the show. You mentioned at the beginning, in the pre-show, you needed to address something with your bookings and the different websites and what people are expecting from you. Can we get into that now before we go?
Yeah, thank you so much for reminding me, because I meant to say it last time because I've been getting hundreds of emails on it. So I have the 2 websites. I have the CatherineEdwardsAcademy.com, which is up until now been my training courses and my consults. So if you wouldn't mind just scrolling down there on the page, if you can, JC. Basically, if you scroll down on that homepage, there's various courses there, but you can also book consults from there. But there isn't a booking calendar there. So if, say, you go on to one of the consults that we've just scrolled past, you would basically, there's a little video at the top of the page which explains, I am moving across all my consults to make it simpler to my CatherineEdwards.life website. So by the end of the week, there'll be a separate tab on there to book the consults, because the training site isn't very user friendly. So for anyone booking this week, please do look at the little video at the top when you go onto the right consult page and just follow those instructions. And I will then email you once I've got your consult form and your booking and arrange a time with you. And then it will be much more straightforward from next week onwards. So because you will be able to select some time slots as well. Which is going to make it much easier for people across the globe. So I've got certain bits of the week that I allocate to the consults but they are getting very, very booked up before Christmas. So I wanted to mention it because I get so many emails each week about it. So thank you.
Okay, very good. So there you go. And of course, you can follow her and her work here at Catherine Edwards on YouTube. And if you're watching this video on Catherine's YouTube channel, please come over to mine here at BeyondMystic. This is our 3rd channel. So you can find me at Jean-Claude at BeyondMystic 3 and click that subscribe button. Tonight, we have Janine coming back to the show. Wait a second here. Does that make sense? Yes, she is. Hopefully, our friend Bruce Sees All has seen his email and he's coming to the show tomorrow. We're looking at some really cool stuff happening on the moon, so you'll be excited about that. Sacred Temples with Robin McLeavy is coming up also tomorrow night. This is a friend and family of Wow, I have trouble speaking today. Of Janine. Anyways, she's into some really, really cool healing things. Really excited to bring that on the show. Rob Kirby's coming back, and also as Craig Hemke this week. We're looking at some weird things happening in the financial system, and these guys are going to help us decode of that. So anyways, there's like 23 or 40 shows here already coming up in the live streams. As you can see, these are the upcoming live streams. I'll be pretty busy here in the next couple of weeks with all of this stuff. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. I absolutely love these conversations with Catherine. Merci beaucoup, Catherine. And of course, yes, it is true. Life is but a dream. Where and when are we? That is the question. Perhaps for the next show next week. Thank you, Catherine. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon, everyone.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your brilliant comments.
Au revoir.
Bye.